Often, throughout our lives, we have a varying expression of different emotions and impulses. We laugh and we cry, we dare and we fear, we love and we hate, but all this without understanding the underlying impulses that lead us to our behavior. We think we know each other, but yet, what do we really know about ourselves? Generally, we base our identity or who we are on aspects such as our name, our family, where we come from, or where our parents come from, the social environment in which we live, etc. But if we reflect for a moment, we realize that these are all external elements that have very little to do with who we actually are. So, who and what are we really? What is beyond the physical body? Are we just flesh, blood, and bones? We are much more than just a physical body. With our 5 senses, we can undoubtedly verify that we do have a physical body. Unfortunately, it is not as easy or familiar for us to recognize, much less know about our own psychology. Since we cannot see or touch our own psyche, it remains something abstract and incomprehensible to the average person. It is essential to know who we are, where we come from, where we are going, what is the purpose of our existence, and why we exist. Making a living to put food on the table and a roof over our head is undoubtedly necessary, but it surely is not the only purpose in life. So, what is the purpose of our life? In order to be able to answer these questions, we must learn something new. The Gnostic science defines 3 elements that make up our psychic structure, or our inner world. These 3 elements, which we will study in depth in this class, are the personality, the essence, and the ego. The personality. Every human is born in a particular environment and culture that undoubtedly influences the development of that person. We're all born as a blank canvas, and depending on the environment we're born into, we subsequently develop the skills needed to adapt to our environment. This capacity for development is done through inherent observation. For example, the formation of a child born within the jungles of nature will be very different from that of a child born in the middle of an urban city. Within this formative process, there are constant examples which the person will observe and subsequently imitate. There are precepts that the immediate circle will instill. Every experience, every concept, every idea that we come into contact with in our environment form what we call the personality. The personality is an energetic vehicle that is formed from the moment a person is born until approximately 7 years of age, and that will be strengthened and reinforced with the different life experiences that he or she may have. Many times we hear that this or that person has no personality as a synonym for lack of character, but the reality is that we all form a personality. We all have a certain personality. We have formed that personality with the concepts, customs, habits, ancestral traditions, educational systems, taboos that religions with their norms and dogmas have imposed on us, titles, surnames, patriotisms, nationalisms, executive positions, etc. The problem is not having a personality. As we know, it is simply a vehicle of expression. The problem is that we base our identity, what we are, who we are, on this personality, which has little to do with the authenticity of who we really are. In the personality, we will not find what is authentically ours. We will find everything that we have acquired from the outside: family, society, culture, academic formation, etc. There are personalities and personalities. We find in some people who lead a simpler and less material life a quieter, more passive personality. A personality that is more in accordance with the rhythms of life in nature. We can also find people who have a much more competitive, reactionary personality, fruit of having been trained in an environment away from the natural rhythms of life, and where it takes a frenetic pace, bombarded by the media and full of all kinds of contamination, visual, auditory, etc. By this, we mean that there are personalities which, due to being more dense and negative, are a hindrance in our process of self-knowledge, making it more difficult and in some cases even almost impossible. But it is important to emphasize that personality itself is only a mask, not shaped by transcendental, eternal, spiritual values. It is simply a vehicle of expression. Personality begins to form with the birth of the physical body, becomes stronger over time, becomes rigid and routine in old age, and eventually disintegrates slowly as the physical body also does after death. Sometimes certain physical chemical conditions related to a specific place, climatic conditions, added to the psychic sensitivity of certain people can make perceptible the personalities of the deceased, which are commonly known as ghosts. The old personality of the deceased are usually seen in the same places where they used to go frequently. It is an energetic vehicle formed and strengthened in a specific space and time. Commonly called ghosts, they are by no means the soul or spirit of the person. That is why we affirm that grounding our identity in personality is the result of ignorance. The essence. As we explained before, personality was born in its time and dies in its time. There is no future for the personality of the deceased. But there is something that does not die along with our physical body, something that continues beyond death, and that makes up what is our psychic apparatus. This is composed of a duality, symbolized by the eternal struggle between light and darkness, between good and evil. In our studies, we call them essence and ego. Essence is a spark from the divine. It is our true reality, our true identity. It is vulgarly said that we have a soul, a spirit, to refer to a divine transcendent aspect within the human being. In truth, what we have is a divine spark, called essence, and that contains within itself all our potentiality and the possibilities of developing. It is the only thing that has true reality within us. In Zen Buddhism, it is called Buddhata, and it is the psychic material that we have to develop spiritually. Essence has no beginning or end. It is not born and it does not die. It is on a trip or pilgrimage, joining the human organism as part of that trip, in order to acquire wisdom through its experiences. The idea that Gnosis has in relation to the divinity has similarity with the wisdom of many ancestral cultures. The description of the divinity as a living and dynamic supraconscious intelligence that becomes conscious of itself through the particles that compose it. In this case, the different essences, since each person has its own. The essence is incorporated into the human organism with the first breath of the newborn and withdraws from the body during the last breath before death. Although it is designated to a certain body at the time of conception, it is only at the first breath of the child that it is incorporated and established in that physical body. The characteristics of the essence give the child its most remarkable traits, such as spontaneity, ability to live in the moment, happiness, beauty, naturalness, freedom, etc. The essence freely expresses itself during the first years of the child's life, manifesting in purity, beauty, and charm. But little by little, as the personality is formed, the expression of the essence becomes limited until it is finally deprived of its possibility to manifest itself. As adults, it is very difficult to find people who express their true essence. Through our monotonous day-to-day routine, we become slaves of times and schedules, leading an artificial and unhappy life. For this reason, we must reconnect with our true identity, with our origin, with our essence. It is in this way that we can walk the path of self-knowledge. The manifestation of the essence within us gives us the awareness and clarity that we need for our spiritual development. At this moment, our essence, although it is in us, is not active. It is asleep, in a state of lethargy, as a cause of the free manifestation of our psychic aggregates, which constitute the ego. The ego. The physical body has been created with the purpose of the essence manifesting itself and acquiring the indispensable experiences for its development. But unfortunately, the essence is trapped by the ego, composed of multiple psychological aggregates, the living personification of our defects. First of all, it is important to point out that the human being, from the psychic point of view, is not one, but many. We are conformed by a psychological multiplicity, a multiplicity that has us dispersed and divided without the ability to gravitate here in the present. We are no more than victims of our own circumstances. Because the ego has its own energy, there is a constant battle within ourselves over who or what psychological element will take front stage. The ego manifests in our thoughts, our emotions, our instincts, etc. Let's take a moment to analyze how difficult it is for us to follow through with projects and commitments that we take on at a given moment, whether they are related to work, our personal life, or of any kind for that matter. At the time the person makes a certain commitment, it is likely that a particular psychological element is manifesting in that person, but soon that psychological element disappears and instead appears another that has nothing to do with the commitments made by the other. In these psychological conditions, it is logical that the human being is full of permanent contradictions, that he fails his commitments or finds it hard to fulfill them, that the infatuation that exists today does not exist tomorrow, that we love and we hate the same person. The psychological aggregates being referred to are our passions, desires, fears, hatreds, selfishness, envy, pride, gluttony, laziness, anger, attachments, sentimentality, etc. Just as water is composed of many drops, just as the flame is composed of many igneous particles, thus the ego is composed of many eyes. The ego is multiple, pluralized. This is why the human being lacks continuity towards a goal or direction. We are, in reality, many, not one. To deny the multiplicity of eyes within ourselves is to deny the intimate contradictions that exist internally and many times externally from moment to moment in our life. If it is not the essence that is being expressed throughout the day, then it is the psychological multiplicity that makes up the ego. Every idea, every feeling, every movement, any sensation, any desire, etc., are likely the simple psychological manifestations of different selves, which are not linked together nor coordinated in any way. The ego's purpose is to sustain itself, and the only way it sustains itself is through the vehicle of expression that we give it, our body, our thoughts, our life. In actuality, we are asleep, with our consciousness all but inactive. What's even deeper is that we do not even suspect that we are asleep. The human being in our current state lacks an authentic sense of responsibility or coherence in our life. And what's worse is that we think very highly of ourselves. It is urgent to fight against the fantasy that makes us think that we are the best, when in reality we are far from our potential. It is indispensable to know the foundations on which we rest. It is the first step in the path of self-knowledge. It is good to point out that the ego does not disappear with the death of the physical body, but while the person is deceased, it remains in that region known as eternity, and later it incorporates itself again in the next existence, complicating and strengthening life after life. The practice of self-observation. The first step of becoming aware of the reality we just mentioned is to practice self-observation. This will allow us to witness the various expressions of our own psychology. We need an objective perspective to achieve perfect self-observation. We apply the practice of self-observation in the different situations of daily life. In order to do this, we must internally stand in the doorway, if you will, of where the inner world meets the outer world, converting ourselves into both the observer and the observed. This will allow us to discover which psychological element is manifesting through us in a particular moment, making us react a certain way. We can also witness that we are not in control of our own thoughts, but rather we are moved by invisible springs or elements that live within us. Later, we will be able to deepen the self-observation practice, not only to what we do, but also to what we think and what we feel. With genuine and sincere efforts, this is a practical way to learn about what truly lies within and what moves us to act or react throughout our life. We must learn to tune in with the observer, our essence, to observe the psychological elements within us, the ego. May we put this teaching into practice so we can verify this wisdom as we learn about ourselves. This is the first step to the path of self-knowledge, to learn how to self-observe.